Good morning, happy Friday, and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you as always. Amber, welcome back. Happy Friday.
Thanks, Lindsey. Happy Friday.
Weekend plans?
I'm going to the Georgetown basketball game against UConn tomorrow.
Ooh,
so I'm excited
nice.
about that. You know what's really sad? It's my last year as a young alumni.
Oh, gosh.
I know.
They start to, you don't even check the box. It's like, are you 25 to whatever, 35? I'm like, why am I moving boxes? And when I put boxes, it's like deeply offensive because the box span is so big. I'm like, what have I done the last decade?
It's brutal.
Yes.
It's tough. All right, coming up on Rising, Venezuela opposition leader Maria Corina Machado visited the White House and gifted President Trump her physical Nobel Peace Prize.
Plus, in a show of support for Denmark, several European leaders are sending troops to Greenland as the White House continues to express their desire to acquire Greenland.
And there's new polling out on Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's Senate primary bid against James Talarico. But first, Lindsey, what's in your lens?
Let's talk about it. So right now, Minnesota feels a little bit like a pressure cooker. And what's happening there is bigger than just one city, one governor, or one president. I think it's a snapshot of what happens when immigration becomes a political weapon instead of a policy problem that demands grown-up solutions. So Governor Tim Walz tried to lower the temperature as tensions escalated in Minneapolis, urging protesters to remain peaceful and asking President Trump to step back from threatening to deploy the U.S. military. He took to X with this appeal, writing in part, quote, "I am making a direct appeal to the president. Let's turn down the temperature. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are." That's not too radical language. That's a governor trying to prevent a bad situation from becoming worse. But the backdrop matters here. Minneapolis has seen aggressive, large-scale federal immigration enforcement actions, protests, and now 2 federal agent-involved shootings in just 1 week. 1 American citizen, as you all know, is dead. In response, President Trump floated invoking the Insurrection Act, a dramatic escalation that would give federal troops expanded authority over law enforcement inside the state. This goes far beyond Title X, which allows the National Guard to support local law enforcement. The Insurrection Act is a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. Mayor Jacob Fry also pushed back, warning against further escalation. He wrote on X, quote, "Minnesota needs ICE immigration and customs enforcement to leave, not an escalation that brings additional federal troops beyond 3,000 already here. My priority is keeping local law enforcement focused on public safety, not diverted by federal overreach." Again, that's a local leader saying more force isn't the same as more safety. A CNN poll backs that up, released on Wednesday. It found that 51% of Americans believe the presence of ICE officers in cities across the U.S. has made people, quote, less safe. The White House has accused Walz, Fry, and other Democrats of inflaming tensions. In a statement to The Hill, spokesperson Abigail Jackson said, quote, "Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, and Democrat leaders in Minnesota have done nothing but turn up the temperature, smear heroic ICE officers, and incite violence against them, all in defense of criminal illegal aliens." Now, this back and forth reduces what was a complex policy failure into villains and slogans, while the chaos on the ground is just still continuing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Both sides have helped get us here. Republicans blame Democrats for the migrant crisis, pointing to Biden's policies and sanctuary cities. Democrats argue Republicans exploit immigration politically, sabotage bipartisan solutions like the 2024 border bill, and rely on rhetoric that's rooted more in fear than facts. What's missing is the urgency around actual legislation. Even voices in Trump's own orbit have been signaling concern. Joe Rogan, for example, who voted for Trump, has openly said he feels like this is going too far.
And then I can also see the point of view of the people that say, yeah, but you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
CNN's Abby Phillip asked the most basic, necessary question. If this crisis is truly that serious, why isn't Congress legislating instead of escalating?
They control the House, the Senate, and the White House. And they have a Supreme Court that is in their favor. So why is it, explain to me, 12 months of Donald Trump, no legislation whatsoever on immigration?
At some point, someone has to be the adult in the room. We're past the blame game. We're here now with real people, real communities, and real risk. If lawmakers across the spectrum are serious about safety, order, and humanity, then de-escalation and workable immigration legislation aren't optional. They're the only way out of this chaos.
All right, lots to potentially discuss here.
Yeah.
I guess let's start with the legislative aspect of this, because one thing that I've been curious about is there obviously have been a lack of conversations between Democrats and Republicans on the Hill in terms of a potential legislative quote-unquote fix to the immigration issue. But I'm curious about what the specifics are that people are looking for on immigration legislation. Is it amnesty? Is it more border security? What specifically do people want Republicans to do that Trump is not?
Well, I think the fact that Trump is making decisions that are the conversations start with some friction with these Democratic mayors. And then he's just like, well, I'm doing this because it's within my rights to send ICE there. To me, that's not a solution that's going to just go and not get any pushback. So if Congress does look at this and say, okay, we didn't pass the bill in 2024 that people thought would do many different things, not what the president's doing right now, closing the border and some other things, they should sit down and talk about what solutions Congress wants to work for. So that requires the people that are voted into office to go talk to their constituents and see what immigration reform they want. And if we talk about polls from the election season in 2024, you'll remember a lot of people agreed that Biden dropped the ball with immigration. A lot of people agreed that they wanted some kind of reform. So it really wouldn't be only through my lens about what perspective I would want to see done. But I think the entire country was on the similar page. They want to see something done. But now there are voices that voted for Trump and were adamant in getting him elected and really catalysts for it that are criticizing they didn't want this done. So it's really up to all American people that feel so, I guess, overwhelmed by the action happening right now to talk to their local officials and say, here's what we want to see happen in Congress, because nothing's being done. And really, sometimes it requires all these leaders proposing ideas and really sitting down and doing their jobs in Congress and coming to us, the American people, with a bipartisan solution, since the 2024 proposal was not it for people. And I really thought that the Trump administration was going to move forward and push through a new legislation when he got in office. But that didn't happen. I thought that would be immediate because he had reportedly told a lot of congressional members not to vote for that legislation. So I thought the first thing on his agenda, outside of just sending ICE to cities, would be to get something on the books.
Yeah, one of the first bill that Congress did pass when Trump took office was the Laken-Riley Act, which basically made it easier for illegal aliens with criminal histories to be detained and deported, but not, I guess, the comprehensive immigration legislation that some people were looking for. On the Insurrection Act, I do think, it's important to look at what that is actually meant to do, which is it gives the federal government the ability to send in the National Guard in situations where there is unlawful obstruction or rebellion. And what we've been seeing in Minneapolis, both before and after the death of Renee Good, was mass protests, but not just people filming ICE or watching or protesting, but actually getting involved in the situation and obstructing law enforcement proceedings. There are groups like Minnesota ICE Watch that actually encourage people to try to pry suspects out of ICE's custody, to use their vehicles to block ICE's movement. And in the aftermath of the death of Renee Good, there were actually riots taking place in Minneapolis where people were breaking into law enforcement vehicles, stealing weapons, graffitiing the vehicles, stealing personal information of ICE agents. And so I'm actually wondering where the line is for Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, because I think we're actually past due for that moment.
Well, I think that the Democratic leadership in Minnesota and Minneapolis have now been saying, let's bring the temperature down. So my bigger point outside of what he can do next is hopefully the best next step is to get everybody at least in conversation to figure out what the long-term solution is. So even if National Guard comes, that's not a long-term solution. I just like to see adults at the table because no one wants to see this happening in Minnesota.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But up next, Venezuela's Maria Machado visited D.C. on Thursday and presented the Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump. We'll be right back. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Machado stopped by the White House yesterday to meet with President Trump, where she presented him with something he's been after for months now, the Nobel Peace Prize, which Machado won back in October for her work to achieve a peaceful transition of power in her home country.
Now, according to the Nobel Institute, the awards themselves cannot be transferred, but Machado gave the medal she received to Trump, and the White House later confirmed that the president kept it. Here she is after the meeting.
I presented the President of the United States the medal of the Nobel Peace Prize as a recognition for his unique commitment with our freedom.
She also told a small crowd of supporters outside the White House, Gates, quote, "We can count on President Trump."
Following the meeting, Trump took to Truth Social, saying it was my great honor to meet Maria Corina Machado of Venezuela today. She is a wonderful woman who has been through so much. Maria presented me with her Nobel Peace Prize for the work I have done. Such a wonderful gesture of mutual respect. Thank you, Maria. During Thursday's press briefing, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt responded to concerns about Venezuela's current interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. Leavitt indicated that Rodriguez has been cooperative. Take a listen.
Secretary Rubio and the administration have been in constant communication with Ms. Rodriguez and other members of the interim government in Venezuela. They have been extremely cooperative. They have thus far met all of the demands and requests of the United States and of the president. And I think you have all seen that play out. We obviously had a $500 million energy deal that was struck in large part because of the cooperation from Ms. Rodriguez. The president likes what he's seeing and will expect that cooperation to continue.
Now, Machado didn't just stop with a visit to the White House. She made a visit to Capitol Hill to meet with congressional leaders as well. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy told the AP following that meeting that she reminded them that Delcy Rodriguez is in many ways worse than Maduro and expressed to them, quote, "If there's not some progress, real progress towards a transition in power and or elections in the next several months, we should all be worried." He also noted that, to his knowledge, she did not get a commitment from the White House to hold those elections.
Obviously, a lot still up in the air in Venezuela regarding the actual transition of power and this interim government, which is filled with, Maduro allies. And the question that will be hanging over this entire operation to remove Maduro is, will Rodriguez and these other individuals who are still in power be sufficiently committed to carrying out the U.S.'s principles and demands in terms of what they want to see moving forward? And if not, what is the U.S. prepared to do, if anything, about it? There's been reporting that the CIA was concerned that Machado did not have enough organization and preparation in order to actually lead the country with her party, at least in the short term. And so they're trying to basically avoid the traps of previous regime change efforts by having some continuity in the meantime with Maduro's underlings. But all of this is obviously still very fluid.
Yeah, I think through what we saw, Machado seems like she reveres the president and they have a dialogue back and forth. I mean, I know that the Nobel Peace Prize organization itself won't recognize the honor being given to the president who has yet to win one himself. But I mean, she compared this gesture to Simon Bolivar that liberated Venezuela in the 1800s from Spanish rule. So she feels deeply about this. Mm-hmm. When they first reported it, that she said, I would dedicate this to President Trump, I was like, well, let me just see more. I'm going to watch more. I'm very critical, but she obviously feels that way. And I think two things can be true. A lot of Venezuelans feel that way. So in Florida, we saw where the biggest Venezuelan population is in our country, a lot of celebration about the fact that they got rid of somebody who they thought was so harmful of a leader for their country, and now he's in U.S. custody. For me, the issue has always been next steps. It doesn't seem like the administration is focused in any way. I mean, they've been asked specifically by reporters from News Nation and others on Air Force One, what are the next steps in regards to transfer of power and government, and trusting that Delcy Rodriguez, who publicly immediately after Maduro was taken out of the country, has said and vowed support to Maduro and has criticized our government, and to watch what's happening there right now with military officials reported to the New York Times, going through people's phones in Venezuela, making sure that none of their WhatsApp messages say anything negative about Maduro, harassing people in those ways, still affecting their civil liberties. I think that I'm not sure that I trust that without a governmental change, which a lot of people in the U.S. don't want to be involved in, there will be true democracy that Machado wants to see. And so she's allowed to be as excited as she wants, and so are the people of Venezuela for step one. But I think when we see our president mostly and more significantly talking about the next steps in regards to oil and how that benefits the U.S. and Venezuela, and not talking about any transition of power, that should be really concerning to the people that were so excited about democracy, because democracy is not only the moment of taking someone out of power, it's the next steps to make sure that these things are enforced. And the immediate aftermath we're seeing does not seem like freedom for the people of Venezuela. Yeah,
we definitely have to keep an eye on her request for elections to be held within the next few months, because if they actually hold a new election and the results are the same as the previous one, which was then effectively stolen by Maduro, then there could be that peaceful transition of power in the democratic way without the U.S. just installing basically a replacement for Maduro, which could potentially help stave off some of the unrest that typically follows a forced regime change operation. So I am curious as well as to whether or not the administration is going to help facilitate that democratic process in Venezuela and what exactly that's going to look like.
Yeah, and I think that the administration should be really transparent about the next steps there. I mean, I know that Congress failed to proceed with the War Powers Act that would, kind of stop the president from making these big decisions that we want Congress to be involved in. And so that directly ties to Venezuela, because I think it was on the table because of what was happening to the ships in the Caribbean Sea. And so I think that I would like to be more involved as an American citizen in this conversation, because it ultimately does affect us. I mean, if Delcy Rodriguez does not cooperate in some way, even though we'll take Caroline Leavitt's word for it that she is cooperating very well, and ignore stuff that she said on local television in Venezuela, let's say we're going that route, we still have to know that we feel comfortable with the plan moving forward. Because if they don't cooperate or something does go ajar, then are we saying military action is next? I think we should be transparent with the American people, since the way we got here wasn't extremely transparent, but we're here and we can't pull back where we're already at. But I think leaving them hanging at this point, it's not a great thing for the country, but it's also probably not a great thing for America to get involved in another foreign conflict.
I'm also wondering if Rodriguez's public statements are a way to kind of save face with the country's Maduro-supporting population, because I think it's possible for her to be sort of telegraphing that publicly, but behind the scenes cooperating with the U.S., because if I saw Delta Force, rappelling from helicopters into the presidential palace and coming in and snatching my leader in the middle of the night, I would probably think twice about not
playing games.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, you think about if Maduro was freed, because you're hearing a lot of his pushback from his lawyers about what happens in that state. Nobody really knows what happens if that's the case.
Well, and that might take years for that entire legal process to play out too. So I wouldn't bet on him getting off the hook anytime soon. In terms of her being able to hang on, at least in the next few months.
But
right?
People like that, I feel like she might say she's considering the U.S. and how their tactics can easily take her out of there just as easily, and that she's considering Maduro, and if he gets released in 5 years and comes after her, he doesn't seem like somebody who plays by the rules. I would be concerned on both ends. So
yeah,
Delcy Rodriguez has a lot going on. Up next, European troops have been deployed to Greenland as President Trump persists in expressing his desire to acquire the Arctic island. Don't go anywhere.
As President Trump reiterates his interest in acquiring Greenland, Denmark has stressed that there's a fundamental disagreement over the future of the Arctic island.
In a show of support for Denmark, troops from several European countries arrived in Greenland on Thursday. French President Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday wrote on X, quote, "At the request of Denmark, I have decided that France will participate in the joint exercises organized by Denmark and Greenland, Operation Arctic Endurance. The first French military elements are already on their way. Others will follow." After meeting with Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Danish Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen told reporters, quote, "The group, in our view, should focus on how to address the American security concerns while at the same time respecting the red lines of the Kingdom of Denmark."
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt reiterated Thursday that President Trump still wants Greenland.
The two sides agreed to really establish a working group of individuals who will continue to have technical talks on the acquisition of Greenland. But the president has made his priority quite clear. He wants the United States to acquire Greenland. He thinks it's in our best national security to do that.
Meanwhile, Republican Senators Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski plan to travel to Copenhagen today to try to reassure the Danish Prime Minister that there would be a strong Republican opposition to any effort by President Trump to use military force to acquire Greenland. This is first trying to pay the people like $1,000 or more a piece to overrule leadership there. Again, I can't say this enough. These are our allies, and we already have an agreement in place with them that we can have boots on the ground there, station people there. We can use the sea space around them if we need to. We just have to have a conversation with leadership. That's pretty much the layman's terms of what's in the agreement. So I don't understand why we need to own and occupy and try to bribe them when they have adamantly said we're not interested, but we really like you guys as an ally. And I know we have Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski that are going to Denmark today, but there are reportedly a lot of other Republican senators that are saying, no, we're not just going to like bully Greenland into being U.S. territory. So I don't know how the president has like a leg to stand on here. We're not just conquering like the conquistadors. Like we're not doing that. And that's not the time that the United States or the world is in.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with the negotiations and certainly with that Republican visit to Denmark today. Last week we were talking about this as well, and I brought up the security concerns with, we've got Alaska on the Pacific side, and it would be nice to have Greenland on the Atlantic side to stave off, potential Russian incursions. But I mean, my preference obviously is that it be done with the support of Greenland and Denmark. One of the other things I found interesting as I was reading more about this is there's a piece in The Spectator about the importance of Greenland and that space base that's there in terms of intercepting and tracking Russian missiles, and also how it pertains to the space race. And they were talking about how this is the only base that the U.S. has above the Arctic Circle, and the data that's transmitted from that base to the United States is hugely important for if there is some kind of missile attack for the U.S. to be able to respond promptly. And one of the sort of lingering issues for Americans who want to take Greenland is that this space base has not been well maintained. They've had outages in the past under Denmark's control. And so there's a feeling that if the U.S. had full operational control over not just the base itself, but also the country more broadly, that they would be able to better maintain, to be able to better access that data and make sure that everything is kind of up to snuff.
And I was with you every part of the way until it got extremely expansionist and was like, we need to run the whole country. Like, why can't we just talk to Denmark and figure out how we can run the base? If the base is decrepit and needs work and is not as effective as it needs to be, let's talk about having more presence there and really putting our dollars and our money there. But just, trying to take ownership of a place that doesn't want us to, that's also an ally. It feels like we're, I thought it was as much as a joke as we were saying about Canada being the 51st states, but I'm seeing that obviously the president is very serious and everyone's on high alert because of Venezuela. So people don't really know what's next and what state we're in. Some people are arguing like if we don't do it, other countries will start taking over different territories. And I don't know that is the next step for us.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Trump can be very convincing. But up next, the White House is announcing a new plan to bring down healthcare costs. Stick around for that. President Trump unveiling Thursday a framework of proposals to address healthcare costs.
Democrats have attacked Trump and Republicans in recent months for failing to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits that expired at the end of the year. And it appears this is the president's response in order to stifle that line of attack heading into the midterms. Trump has dubbed the framework the Great Healthcare Plan. Take a listen.
I'm thrilled to announce my plan to lower healthcare prices for all Americans and truly make healthcare affordable again. We're doing things that nobody's ever been able to do. We're calling it the Great Healthcare Plan. Instead of putting the needs of big corporations and special interests first, our plan finally puts you first and puts more money in your pocket. I'm calling on Congress to pass this framework into law without delay.
According to the White House, the biggest change in the healthcare plan is where subsidy dollars are going. Instead of subsidizing healthcare companies, the money will go directly to eligible Americans. The plan also targets prescription drug prices and pricing transparency. Senator Roger Marshall, a doctor and a Republican, praised the new plan on X, writing in part, "This plan includes so many of the important healthcare initiatives we've been fighting for in a comprehensive package. Price transparency is exactly what my price tags bill delivers, lowering costs for every American. We also must put patients back in control of their own care."
But some on the left were a bit more skeptical. Filmmaker Morgan J. Freeman, who now, no, not that one. That's what I was thinking as I read it too, wrote his post, quote, "Trump has revealed the Great Healthcare Plan, which will give families $2,000 annually to purchase their own health insurance. The average annual health insurance premium for a family is $26,000. His proposal will cover 28 days of health insurance and leave families uninsured for 337 days out of the year. Maha, baby. And political commentator, I can't even read today. Political commentator Ed Krasenstein wrote, in part, are Trump supporters really falling for this garbage? The current subsidies of the ACA go to American citizens, not to the insurance companies. This changes nothing other than the fact that you will get the money before you buy your insurance instead of after. More gaslighting from Trump.
Yeah, this is a one-pager with very scarce details.
I'm so happy that you said that.
Let's be real.
I don't want to just argue that this, but I did say I wanted to hear something from the Republican side.
There's something.
So let's just start there, because I was like, you can't keep bashing how much we spend on health insurance and how broken the system is since Obama days. I'm not even talking about recently, and have no real plan pushed forward. This isn't still not a real plan. But it's a word, like a couple words.
It's a step forward, I guess. But yes, it's. I wouldn't call it comprehensive. We haven't even seen the legislation yet. And as we know, the legislation is where all of the icky stuff is always hiding, and there's always all of these kickbacks that are thrown in there, and treats for lawmakers. And so I want to see the actual bill. There's a couple of things in the plan that I do like. The idea of the most favored nation drug pricing. There's no reason why America spends all of this money in research and development to have these very innovative drugs and medicines, and then Europe gets to pay half the price that Americans pay because of their government-run system, and we have to basically foot the bill for all of the good research and work that we're doing. So I appreciate that we are trying to lower drug prices. I like the idea of price transparency at hospitals especially. It is the case now that, you get an ambulance ride and you don't know how much it's going to cost you until the bill comes in. But even then, that's not what you ultimately pay if you're on health insurance, right? And so a lot of that obfuscation leads to hospitals and other providers being able to jack up prices because we never really see the true cost. And so there's some elements of this that are positive, but is giving people $2,000 a year as a stipend to help offset premiums that are, really 300%.
Yeah.
In recent years, that's not a real solution to what people are feeling.
And we know that extending those ACA subsidies was a COVID measure that kind of still kicked the can down the road. And we always wait until the last minute to try to make some real change. And
right.
Here we are at the last minute.
Yep.
Like there's examples. I was reading a CBS News article. One woman, a social worker, went from $75 to $850 a month. Unreasonable. If she doesn't have health insurance, I would understand why. Another woman was explaining how her premiums rose so much that she's just deciding to keep her kids covered and not herself. And I think when you're facing those choices and in the moment, maybe the best solution is to push the ACA subsidies through and not neglect those, at least for the next year or 2 years, to make sure that people are covered, while you know that it's going to take a long time to implement, hopefully, what we see as a bipartisan solution to healthcare. Because the biggest goal is to figure out how to get these costs lower in the immediate future. I think the president is worried about the midterms. Well, people need to see change immediately. And we know that the subsidies, whether you like them or not, actually did bring costs down. And we know that you can go back and blame healthcare and Obamacare about the prices rising in the first place and taking away some choice. But here we are again. And so I just want people to come together and sit down, and maybe Congress will actually get better ratings on how much of a good job they're doing if they can figure out healthcare. I mean, it affects almost every single American. And, the choice part of it sounds awesome in theory. But sometimes with ACA rules, there are a little bit of red flags that stick out, like insurers could sell cheaper plans that don't cover pre-existing conditions again. And we could be back in that era where people that have any type of ailment automatically get denied coverage. And so I think that we have to make sure we're protecting even the most vulnerable of Americans, not only the most young, healthy Americans, and make sure that our system really is working and effective for all. And hopefully this conversation, because it came from the president, can start a real dialogue in Congress about what a way forward looks like.
And it's tough because there has to be a balance between making sure that young, healthy people are not paying exorbitant prices for health coverage that they don't need, while also making sure that you have a big enough pool of people in the system to bring prices down for people who do have pre-existing conditions or require more comprehensive healthcare plans. And one of the things that was proposed during the Obamacare debate was this idea of letting people sort of pick and choose the different elements of their plan. So for example, if you're an older couple and the wife has gone through menopause, maybe you don't need childcare coverage, right? Or birth coverage, things of that nature. But what ended up happening was that all of the plans were sort of one size fits all. And so people just looking for a basic, PPO or paying over $1,000 a month on their premiums, even if it had all of these things included that they didn't necessarily need. And so there was an issue with the trade-offs that were made in terms of getting the ACA passed didn't really reflect the reality for most consumers. I think one of the issues with the subsidies and the extension is it's possible that if you do extend those for another year or two, where is really the incentive then for Congress to hammer out this plan in the meantime? Because we know that Congress does not like to, as you said, get ahead and do legislation when things are humming along fine and people aren't complaining. And so does that just give them more reason to wait again until the end of the next year and try to do something last minute again? And so, ultimately this comes down to Congress is not doing their job, but I 100% agree that this plan is not, it's not comprehensive enough. We don't have enough details to say whether or not this is going to be the sort of silver bullet that Trump is hoping for to stave off a massive midterm loss.
And it's also just frustrating because when you think about really it took over a huge portion of last year, our government being shut down, and how many people were affected that work in or around the government that just are probably just now receiving some of those funds if they were furloughed or waiting to get paid or still working without pay, like a lot of people who worked in the airport. And so I think that when you look at how many people were affected by this supposed Democratic fight to save healthcare and to get in the new year and nothing changes, I don't know how that will help anybody in the midterms that is watching. Let's use the example of the dramatic example of the woman, and not everyone's will go up this much. Some people $200, but even the person that goes $350 to $550, or the dramatic example from CVS that goes $75 to $850 if she decides to keep it. That's going to be 9 months of her paying $850 if Trump's plan is not implemented before November. And so I don't see how this affects them in any way in the midterms unless they get these prices down before November. A new poll shows State Rep James Talarico leading House Rep Jasmine Crockett for the Democratic Senate nomination in Texas. We'll tell you more next. Democratic Texas State Representative James Talarico is leading Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett by 9 points in the Democratic Senate Texas primary.
An Emerson College Nexstar Media survey released Thursday shows Talarico with 47% support and Crockett with 38%. And we should note here that Nexstar Media does own the Hill.
The polling shows Talarico gaining support from Hispanic and white voters, winning almost 6 in 10 from each group, while 80% of black voters in the primary sided with Crockett.
Men sided with Talarico by 22 points, while women were evenly split between the two Democrats. Talarico, a former middle school teacher, raised more than $13 million since launching his bid in September.
Now, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told Politico earlier this week that he views Texas as a, quote, very possible pickup opportunity.
On the GOP side, the poll shows a tight race. Attorney General Ken Paxton leading Senator John Cornyn by 1 point at 27 to 26%, with 29% undecided. Representative Wesley Hunt is polling at 16% support. Emerson College polling executive director Spencer Kimball said neither Ken Paxton nor John Cornyn appears positioned to reach 50% on the primary ballot as the Republican electorate remains sharply divided. With Wesley Hunt gaining traction at 16%, a runoff between the two candidates now appears likely in May.
In a hypothetical matchup, the poll shows both Talarico and Crockett tied with Paxton at 46%. Economy leads as the top issue for most Texas voters, followed by immigration and threats to the democracy. So we've been seeing a lot of these polls, and they've been going back and forth. I know Jasmine had some wind beneath her wings in the past few weeks and was talking about it, about how she's done a lot of these research herself to see that she has a chance. We saw that a lot of men, it seems, in these early polls in the Democratic primary are not supporting Crockett in the same way. And I think her and Talarico present two different options. But I know what Jasmine Crockett is going after based on interviews that she's done is these low propensity voters. And Texas, I realized through doing this show, has a dramatic number of people who just don't vote in a lot of elections. almost 50%, if not more. Sometimes it's a little bit more. And so I think when she's talking about the people that she's going after, she thinks that she can rally some people to get out of their seats. And some people say that a lot of those low propensity voters maybe historically would lean Democratic or more liberal. And so if they do, then she might have an opportunity to sway a place where people are like, you have absolutely no chance. And so Chuck Schumer is being very positive about it all. Texas is a hard place. I know I spend a lot of time there. My partner's from there. So I get how it could be a hard place for somebody that has such a firm voice as Jasmine Crockett. And maybe if anyone won, they may want one more neutral. But she has a few months to try to prove what she's bringing to the table outside of arguing with President Trump, which we know now is not a winning message. I mean, Kamala campaigned on that. It takes a little bit more. So if she sticks to the economy, and no, it's not going to be like Mamdani type of economy politics happening in Texas, but if she sticks to talking about what's hurting people the most, I think she might have a real argument to get people to at least pay attention and maybe get close to breaking that barrier, if not breaking it.
I was kind of surprised by this polling because I anticipated that the Democratic primary voter was going to be, on average, more progressive than a general election Democrat or really any voter, and that she would poll quite well with them over James Talarico, who is perceived as being slightly more moderate. But that hasn't been the case, and perhaps that's a sign that the Democratic primary electorate is looking at electability in the general election, which has been a source of tension on the Republican side, too, in the debate between Ken Paxton and John Cornyn, where there's been a consistent slate of polls released suggesting that John Cornyn would perform better in a general over Ken Paxton. But Republican primary voters slightly prefer Ken Paxton because he's perceived as being more conservative, right? And so you're seeing a similar dynamic on both sides of the race in partisan terms that I find really fascinating. I've been following the Paxton-Cornyn race a little bit more closely just because I have more sources there. And what I've been hearing basically from both camps is that they pretty much know this thing is going to go to a runoff because of Wesley Hunt's inclusion in the race. And they both are very confident that they can win the runoff, right? Ken Paxton's team has been arguing that he's been outraising John Cornyn. They expect that if they go to a runoff, he will run out of money and they'll basically smoke him. And then alternatively, John Cornyn expects to have the support of the sort of establishment donor class and the, Senate committees, the Senate PACs supporting him in a runoff. And so he thinks he'll actually be able to outpace Ken Paxton. It's all very fun to watch. But yeah, as I mentioned, I'm kind of surprised by the polling on the Democratic side showing Talarico leading by as much as he is when we don't see that similar sort of trouncing between Paxton and Cornyn.
Yeah, I think with Jasmine Crockett, she has a lot going for her because of the name recognition. So automatically that kind of puts her on the map. And we've seen her in recent weeks spend the beginning of the new year on some big shows like The View. But a lot of the conversation outside of, which was a little bit about Texas, was about a variety of the things going on with the president right now, Venezuela. And so I think she has to really focus in and think about all these the media attention and exactly what she's saying and doing that shows policy. Because what we noticed in the Democratic Party that was happening over time when Kamala was running was that people felt like they weren't connecting. And I know that's a federal election and not a local election, but still people felt that there wasn't that connection that really tells you what you're going to do for us as Americans, what you're going to do to change our finances and make it more comfortable. And so that still is, unfortunately, the number one issue on people's mind is just affordability. And what we're hearing in the argument is that a lot of Republicans will say it feels like, might feel still bad, but it really is good. Look at the numbers. And we were heavily critical of Biden for doing the same thing. Like, we don't care what you're telling us in a chart. People can't afford the same groceries they did in 2016, let's say. So I think Jasmine Crockett has to make sure that the messaging is effective. Otherwise, people are going to go with a safer bet because they're like, listen, if one or the other and somebody's talking about the economy out of these two and we wanted the Democratic person, then we're just going to go with Talarico. But if Jasmine Crockett can push through that she has an effective, workable agenda for Texas and be very clear and direct about specific policies, I think that she would have a better chance of getting those people who were not interested, feeling like she's talking to them again, out to at least get her into the race.
There's always a danger, right, in over-nationalizing a campaign, even when you're running for a statewide race like U.S. Senate. And I wonder if that's one of the reasons why Paxton is not really outpacing John Cornyn, because he has made a lot of his race about loyalty to Trump and the administration and things that he wants to see happen on a judicial level, in terms of federal politics, and has not been focused as much on Texas. I mean, he's run on his record, sure, but also in a forward-looking way, what are you going to do for the people in your state? And if it's just defending President Trump, well, maybe that doesn't resonate with people when the economy is one of their top issues, and Trump has been kind of dismissive about people's concerns on the economy. And so I think Jasmine Crockett does face a similar dilemma because her rising star was created by being perceived as this fighter against the Trump administration, but you also have to speak to the direct concerns of the constituents that you're trying to represent.
It's interesting because now that you say that, I think about Texas as a representation of the party breaks in both parties, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing that we can easily criticize Democrats about their way forward. They think that like people are worried if they win the midterms, they might just try to impeach the president all over again. And I'm sure that confident that a lot of people do not want to see that happen again. They like to see policies push forward. And so that's the break of like, did that work last time or did that put fuel in President Trump's fire and his party? And then there's the other side of President Trump, the MAGA base that just loyal to the president no matter what, even when they know like this is not the right time to be saying this, the right tone, but they're still loyal, still defending him. And then there's other people that, you know, can step up like Lisa Murkowski we see traveling to Greenland. It's like, hey, this kind of doesn't feel right for a lot of Republicans, and I'm going to be the one to put my face next to this.
And even Republicans who adopt a lot of the populist policy agenda that has been championed by Trump, like Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, have come under fire by the president lately for opposing regime change in Venezuela. And so even if you are supporting some of those sort of MAGA or America First policies, that doesn't keep you immune, as we've seen, from the president's ire.
Right. Candace Owens is under fire for her latest theories about Charlie Kirk. I know you saw this. We'll be right back to talk about it.
Conservative commentator Candace Owens is back in the news again for comments she made about the death of Charlie Kirk. Owens has repeatedly put forth theories that Kirk's alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, did not act alone and has accused Turning Point USA of being involved in at least a cover-up.
On her podcast earlier this week, she claimed that Charlie Kirk told her that he believed he would die at a young age and even thought he was a time traveler. And she thinks there may have been truth to some of what Kirk said. Take a look.
It is an absolute fact that Charlie Kirk thought that he was a time traveler. He told me he was a time traveler repeatedly. How was he so certain that he was going to die young? How is that possible? How was he even able to describe it as this tragic event? How did he know? How was he certain, by the way, as he said in those messages, that from the moment he signed onto the dotted line to begin Turning Point USA, he knew he was going to die. He knew his death was going to be related to Turning Point USA. That's not a coincidence.
Now, Owens was blasted on social media for her comments, with many people finding her claims too outlandish to take seriously. Political commentator Tim Pool writes on X, quote, Candace is desperately trying to one-up each show to keep her viewers attached. CNN did this with Trump derangement. Eventually, you collapse into absurdity.
And musician and Timcast co-host Phil Labonte says if you ever thought her statements were compelling or that she was making good arguments, now is a good time to find and delete any tweets that communicate that idea. Oh, Phil.
Listen, nobody on the show, and I say nobody because there's usually three of us in rotation, me and Robbie, nobody on this show is particularly fond of Candace Owens. So I try to be the contrarian to at least try to point out something that she may be having, but I'm truly not a fan of Candace Owens. But you guys got to know when somebody's going off the deep end. And I mean, part of me has a little bit of empathy because of the way that she has called him her really good friend. It seems like she's not grappling well with loss. I've dealt with loss of a friend in recent years, and I've had a circle of people that really loved her, and I've heard every single theory about how she knew that, you know, what was going to happen or being gone too soon. I mean, and she might have told those people that this thing might have happened, or, you know, they might have inkling like, I feel like I'm going to live a shorter life than most people. Like, who knows what the dialogue was? But part of that is also grief.
Yeah.
Part of that is just trying to understand and comprehend something that's not comprehensible sometimes. Sometimes somebody passing away at a young age really does not register. And because I've experienced it, I think that like I could just say you have to just pause and back up, because also you're offending and affecting a bunch of people that are probably more hurt than you. I would say his children, his wife now, you know, his widow, you know, so if you have to consider that you're not the most grieving person in the situation. So going on the tirade in the same way that she did, like Bridget Macron, which, for some people was entertaining. This is like just a step too far. You guys already had the conversation. Like, talk to his widow about what you think and like leave it there. Some people need to be excused from this group chat.
One of the things that I learned similar to you when I was grieving a tough loss was how many people try to make it about themselves.
Oh, explain.
Right? Well, it's just, people, it seems like who were not as close to the person who passed or weren't as close in recent years, it's about their grief and how hard it is for them. And it kind of tries to like divert attention from the family, and it just gets very messy. But I'll leave it.
I get
as
that,
vague as
yeah.
that. But watching some of her show over the past few weeks and seeing even people like Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes come out and say that they think that she's kind of gone off the deep end has been very telling. And these recent comments, I mean, people around Charlie have said before that he knew that it was a possibility that he could go quickly or die young because he was aware of the potential threat of violence for his political organizing. And he was very aware of the security issues with doing these outdoor events, but wanted to continue doing them because he felt it was so important, even though he was cognizant of the risk of being exposed constantly and having such a big platform. And so this is not new information that she's presenting, that he felt that way. And it's like, okay, well, he said he was a time traveler. What did he mean by that? Did he mean that he felt like he was like from a different time in terms of being an old soul?
An old soul. I get that, yeah.
The Catholic in me also wants to think that, sometimes people get a feeling that comes from God, that their life is supposed to be a certain way, or they have some kind of purpose, or that they might die young. And that possibility was not really explored by Candace in this rant about the, jumping the space-time continuum. And, sometimes I think we look for complicated explanations to things that should be a little bit more simple just because our minds can't really understand. Like you said, it's incomprehensible what happened. And so we sort of desperately seek for answers to something that's maybe not as neat.
Right. Well, that does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to All the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen on the go, we're available to listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend. Happy MLK.